back to relationships. Romantic and intimate relationships. What have you learned?
Where do you want me to start? If you ever want to see an area that causes more stress as well as more joy, it's probably in the area of romantic relationships, intimate relationships. And at 40 years old now, I'm still single, but I certainly have enough experience under my belt, and I've learned enough on my journeys.
Happily single?
Yes, very much. And there's a reason for that, which I'll share with you later. But and that's one of the first things people say, well, how can somebody who's single give advice on relationships? Well, bear with me and see what shows up. I think, and there's so much on the topic here, Glenn, we could talk for another easy 3-4 hours on this. It's a passion of mine as well as business. But I
wanted to give it some airtime here, though, because I know that you can share things which are really valuable.
And this is what I'm thinking now. If I have a limited amount of time to give the most valuable level of insight into people that are gracious enough to give us their time on watching this, then what would that be? And I would say, well, the first place I would start is that most people unfortunately get involved in relationships for the wrong reasons. And there's many different reasons that I could talk about. Again, I'll try and keep this succinct, but if I was to sum it up as valuably as I can, I would say that the primary reason most people get involved in a relationship is because there's something missing in their life. And the analogy that I could give is, it's like most people walk around like a half circle, like a letter C, looking for another half circle to try and complete them. And whether it's the classic sort of Tom Cruise line, or whether it's somebody that is feeling lonely, whether it's somebody that can't cope on their own, whether it's somebody that hasn't got an identity that supports being alone or single, many different reasons. And the first thing I will say in terms of wanting a successful relationship is that you cannot have a foundation for a successful relationship unless first of all you have a complete relationship with yourself. And what I mean by that is, rather than walking around this half circle looking for another half circle to complete you, which by itself breeds codependency, by itself, by definition, breeds fear of loss. Unfortunately, it has a time limit. Now, it may feel wonderful initially because you have something that was missing, and there's always something great you can feel with that. And this is the woman of my life, and I'm going to get married because they light me up so much. But if it was brought together based upon this level of interaction to begin with, and we're oversimplifying, of course, but for purposes of metaphor, people I think understand where we're coming from here.
Right.
If you can concentrate on becoming whole with yourself first, then you can find somebody else who's whole and celebrate being together. That's a different relationship.
This is the third stage relationship that David Dada talks about, right?
There's a lot more, I think, into a level of
sorry, I
David,
interrupt you. Carry on. Yeah.
Where Dada comes in is a level of initial historic relationship, which is dependent, right? Which means that I need you because you're my wife, and I need you to look after the kids, and you need me because I earn the money. Very 1950s based model.
Right.
And again, I could talk for an hour on each of these, but just to lay the framework as a label.
Okay.
The level 2 relationship has far more to do with independency, which is women coming out of that sort of 50s model into the 70s, for example, classic case. I don't need a man. Most women over the age of 30 or 40 today grew up with parents, specifically mothers, that taught them never to rely on a man, because they came from a suppressed level of relationship which had no basis in unconditional love. It had its basis in codependency.
Right.
Yeah. So if you take a level of independency, women tend to go through, or went through a pendulum swing of independence to protect themselves from being hurt. Because I don't need a man. What do I need a man for? Right? We've now, we can now vote. We now have our own bank accounts. So, you had sexual liberation for the first time in the 60s when the pill came about.
Right.
Right. You had economic independence going through the 70s, where women's rights demanded equal pay, and about time. So you had this whole, like, you know, women got shorter hair, they started wearing suits, they became, you know, they started growing balls. And the men, by contrast, again, sometimes looking at the example of their fathers being this macho jerk that was having an affair with his secretary because there was no love with his wife.
Yeah.
She was getting love from relationship with the kids, because there was no, you know, level of unconditional love that was there. It was all dependent. The guys said, you know, I don't want to be that guy. And they started getting more in touch with their feminine. They started growing their hair, wearing earrings, and you ever see any movies in the 70s, you know, it's classic. Or they started becoming more in touch with their feelings. You know, I'll change the diaper on the baby, sweetheart. Learning how to cook. All that kind of traditional female, you know, role the men embraced to prove that they were the new age men. The women, stepping straight out of the stereotype bedroom kitchen role
into their pinstripe
into their
suits.
Power, into their pinstripe suits, and going out and being on their own. And that worked for a while. That, you know, because any pendulum swing usually, you know, has its own. You know, it's like, you know, two people coming here for a while. It's like, oh wow, something's missing. It's there. But then after a while, you start to understand the women are walking around thinking, well, actually, where are all the real men? Yeah, where's the guy that can sweep me off my feet, scoop me up in his arms, grab me at the back of the head, look in my eyes, and take me to a place I could never take myself? Yeah? But that involves for a woman a level of surrender that she could never bring herself to do with a guy who's weak. And certainly not a guy who's this macho bullshit guy from the sort of 50s model. Because when you say the word surrender to a woman in terms of surrender to a man, a lot of them immediately go to the screw you kind of level. I would never surrender, because they see it as a sign of weakness.
Yes.
Rather than go to, and again, the guys are using the sort of pendulum swing side. The guys are like, well, you know, all these women, they're just ball busters. You know, where's the sensual, soft femininity that I really want? Right? And unfortunately, most women have that level of pattern where they're too busy being independent, are wondering, you know, where's all the real men? Generally, don't attract them because they're too busy trying to be one.
Yes.
Sorry, it's just where it is, and they have a level of unfulfillment. They feel safe and protected because they, you know, I don't need anybody else, and I'm certainly not going to surrender in that traditional sense of, you know, being able to be weak to a man. That's not what I'm talking about, right? That they'll never go there. But there's a level of unfulfillment because true women in their feminine core want to be ravished by a guy that they can surrender to, but not surrender in terms of weakness. Someone that can lay, a woman who can lay her heart at her man's feet, not so he can say, "Shine my shoes, bitch," but so he can, she trusts him enough to look after and protect her.
Right.
And at the same time, he's going to honour his queen with everything he's got. There wouldn't be an ocean he wouldn't swim for her. Not a dragon he wouldn't step in front of for her. That's a different level. That's a more evolved level of relationship consciousness. Right? So, what does it take to enjoy that level? It takes the guy to step up. And if you have a guy who is too busy dealing with his own insecurities, a guy who's still too busy trying to cover up the fact that or prove he's good enough. If he's trying to prove to the world he's good enough, he's likely going to be more into the significance mode. And guys, if you're watching this, please, because I was that guy, please understand that, if you want to understand what women really want, it's not a level of financial security. They don't judge you by your bank balance. The challenge with popular media is that it teaches a guy that the route to connection is significance, i.e. the more significant I am, the more people will love me. The more significant I am, the more girls will want to date me, and all that stuff. Now, ladies, that's bullshit. Right? Unless you have such a craving for certainty that the guy represents that and you're willing to trade it off. But that has nothing to do with unconditional love, as I'm sure you'll agree. So, if you come from a place of trying to be more significant to get connection, you miss the paradox. Because the definition of being significant is separate from, different to, unique.
Yes.
And it's never a route to connection. So instead, if a guy really understands what a woman wants, it's not the size of your bank balance. It's not the car you drive. It's not your stamina. If you really want to know the number one character trait that a woman really appreciates and wants in a man, It's presence. Total, focused, unconditional presence for your woman. Yeah, you see, if you have a woman comes up, so women are like, and just segue out for a second.
Yeah,
so I want to make a distinction.
Please.
You have, and I say men and women here, but I want to just overlay a slightly different level of awareness. And I want to talk about the distinctions between masculine and feminine energy, because they're very different characteristics. And
we have both. Male and female have both, just to be absolutely clear. Male, masculine and feminine energy, right?
Sure. But we also have a center of gravity where we reside as our natural predisposition. So when I say men, I'm usually talking about men in their masculine, and when I say women, I'm talking about, or feminine energy, I'm usually talking about women in their feminine.
Right.
But you can have some naturally masculine women and some naturally feminine and effeminate men. Right?
Sure.
So, but for the purposes of what I'm talking about here, when I use masculine, feminine energy, you understand where I mean. So masculine energy, for example, is very focused, directed. It's mono-thinking. It's all about responding to challenge. Yeah, it's getting from the most efficient way of task completion. Yeah, it goes from A to B in a straight line. It's it's very, very, as I said, directed. Feminine energy, by contrast, is completely different. Feminine energy is always in motion. It's never a straight line. There's no straight lines in nature, and feminine energy is very much like nature. Yeah, if ever you see a straight line in nature, it's man-made. Right? Because that's what masculine energy does. So feminine energy is always flowing. It's here 1 minute, it's there the next, just like the weather. And that's what makes it beautiful. Now, guys can't figure that out. We get threatened by that. We want to know through our need for certainty at that level that it's going to be sunny tomorrow if we have a barbecue. Right? And so we get, if all of a sudden it's blue skies 1 minute and then it's cloudy the next, we get unsettled by that. So if you take women as the essence of nature, very powerful, much more powerful than masculine energy, by the way, and ladies as a side, the biggest challenge I've seen working with women in this area is that they mistake feminine energy for weakness. That's the pattern that causes them to put a suit on, right? Rather than understand that if you lose touch with your femininity, you want to play masculine at masculine, you're going to lose. You and I, Glenn, are core, strong, alpha male, masculine guys. If a woman wanted to go and challenge me at a level of masculine energy to masculine, she's going to lose. It's just part of the game. However, there isn't a woman on this planet in her natural feminine, freedom of expression, beautiful level of energy, innocence, walking past here now that couldn't take you and I out at the knees. Far more powerful.
Beautifully expressed.
So if you have a woman, imagine as a metaphor that she's the ocean. Women are like the ocean. 1 minute, beautifully calm, sunny skies. The next minute is a freaking hurricane for no reason whatsoever. Right?
A tsunami.
Completely, right? And most guys get freaked out by that. They can't handle it.
Yeah.
Right? Or they don't know how to deal with it. And for most men, unfortunately, we become ships on our woman's ocean. And we could have the biggest yacht, or we could be a dinghy. But let's say we're kicking back on our catamaran, having cocktails right now and a margarita, and the sun's out and everything's great and it's cool. And guys, when relationships are going well, it's easy. We know that. But that's not the essence of a relationship, especially a relationship with a feminine woman, because the emotions are always moving.
Right.
So let's say the clouds come. If we then try our best wave prevention strategy, if we try to reconcile with the weather, if we try and turn the boat into the wind, doesn't matter. It's already over. And what I mean by that, if we try and logically reconcile with our woman, we try and fix her problem, we try and make her reason as to why we're right or she shouldn't be doing what she's doing, right? Or telling her all the things that she already knows, guys, right? But that's not the point. See, women don't want to be fixed, they want to be understood. Big difference. But ladies, please understand, when a guy tries to fix your problem, it's because he validates himself by how much he can light up his woman. And that's, being as dumb guys that we are, that's what we know how to do. We know how to fix stuff. So if you bring us problems, we try and fix them. We don't get the fact that you don't want to be fixed. You know how to fix yourself. That's not the issue. You want to be understood. Right? But don't give the guy a hard time over it when he's fixing. Just bear with him that we just don't get that part. But guys, if you're listening to this, please, here's the challenge. If you are a boat on that ocean, it's too late. Why? Because your woman will not trust you. No matter how good-hearted you are, no matter how much you provide for her, no matter how much you're there, she won't trust you if you can be capsized on her ocean. If you're like, stuff this, I'm going down to the bar with my mates because you're in a mood, right? She can't trust that. If you're like, oh honey, it's okay, you do what you want to do, or where do you want to go tonight, sweetheart? Well, I don't know, where do you want to go? Well, wherever you want to go. She's like, well, make a freaking decision. Right? There's a level of masculinity that's required at that point. But if you're a boat, you're already done. Why? Because when I said, a woman will only lay her heart at the feet of a man who she trusts. And there isn't a boat on this ocean that cannot be capsized by the power of nature. Ask the Titanic. So instead of being a boat, what if you're a lighthouse? What if you're a harbour? What if you're a woman in the wildest storm, total tsunami, right, for no reason that you'll ever figure out, whether you did something right or wrong, doesn't matter, never will, but she's just where she is because that's what femininity does, and it's beautiful, and she's in a wildest storm. And instead of going to the bar, instead of trying to fix her, instead of running away, instead of arguing back, you just stand there and look in her eyes with the energy of, bring it on, bitch, give me your wildest storm because I freaking love you and I'm going nowhere. That's a different energy. And most women will be like, whoa.
Yes.
Now, they'll test you, because that's what women do. They will continue to test you. They'll still blow a gale for a while, just to see if you are really a storm, or really a harbour, or if you're just a boat with an anchor, which still wouldn't work. Right? So, but if you can be there, and that's what I mean by presence, if you can be totally present for your woman, when she's freaking out, that's a guy she can trust. And if she can trust and you can live at that level of presence for her no matter what, she'll surrender her heart and you will be able to take her to a place you could never take her, regardless of your bank balance or what car you drive.
I have to say, I think that's one of the most incredibly powerful and moving soliloquies, if I can put it that way, on relationships that I've heard, Peter. I'm not saying that, to flatter you or anything. I thought that was fantastic. I mean, and really so powerful. Beautifully expressed. Beautifully expressed.
I could talk a lot more, and most of what I've learned has come from making mistakes. I've lost some amazing women in my life through being the idiot who was, trying to his wave prevention strategies. Sure. This doesn't come from a place that's inauthentic, and that's probably why I'm so passionate on wanting to help guys understand women and vice versa.
Sure.
But
and please tell us though, what is presence for you, and how do you maintain that presence?
It comes back to what we were saying earlier about understanding tolerance of people's points of view and different models of the world. If I can come from compassion for my woman, guys, in your best day of love for your child, you will never know the depth a woman has for her child. Why? Because her base is bigger. Women are just different. We came through women. We will never understand the level of energy and the level of focus and multitasking awareness and vibrational sensitivity that women have. Just accept that. And as I say, it's part of what makes them beautiful. Irrespective of whether they're breathing fire one minute or caressing you the next.
Yes.
So if you can maintain a level of awareness that it's not about you, don't feel threatened, because if it triggers your fear, then you're going to react.
And that's something you need to deal with, because effectively they're mirroring that back to you, aren't they?
If you can come to the relationship a little more whole, rather than I need somebody, because if you feel alone, you're going to attract somebody else who feels alone, and guess what? Now there's two of you alone. Right? And you could be in the middle of Wembley Stadium, 25, 50,000 people, Glenn, and still feel alone. Do you get it?
Oh, totally.
It's
totally.
not proximity.
No.
It's an inner sense of fulfillment as to whether you can deal with your own stuff. And if you haven't got that dealt with, no amount of connection is going to have a foundation for long-term success.
Beautiful.
You mentioned why I was single. And
well, I didn't say that. I said, are you happily single?
Am I happily single?
Yeah.
And I said I'd cover that point. And again, it's about walking your talk and being integrative to your values.
Right.
As you know, I recently lost my mum, who was probably my last living relative. I have no brothers, no sisters, no grandparents. My father died 4 years ago. I have no sort of aunts, uncles, cousins, or that I stay in touch with on any kind of regular basis. They're quite distant. And so, for me, the strongest force in the human personality is the need to remain consistent with how you define yourself. It's a fundamental psychological principle. In other words, your identity.
Yes.
Why do vegetarians not eat meat? Is it because they have different teeth? Well, no. Their identity is, I am a vegetarian. Why do runners run? Right? Why do they get angsty if they don't run for 2 weeks? They have the same legs. It's because my identity is I am a runner, therefore I run. You understand my point?
Sure.
So, if your identity is one of the strong, if not the strongest part of who you are in terms of governing your behaviour unconsciously. You wouldn't murder somebody tomorrow because your identity is I'm not a murderer. In all fairness, a murderer wouldn't think twice if that's their identity.
Yes.
So, it's an extreme example, but you get my point.
Sure.
So, in order for me, I went through an identity shift when my mother passed away, that I was actually on my own for the first time in my life, in terms of no family. And I needed to get settled with that, because it was so tempting for me to walk out and crave missing connection, that I would have been like that. And I, from a level of integrity, I know this game. If I teach it, I have to walk my talk.
Sure.
And one of the hardest things was I recently broke up before my mum passed away with my fiance at the time, Eileen, for what have you reasons. And I learned a lot from that experience as well. And when my mother was on her deathbed, she died of cancer, as I think you recall.
Sure.
She was very happy because her son was getting married. The apple of her eye and everything else. And I had to make a decision as to whether I go and tell her that I'm splitting up with, my fiance, or
which you'd already decided to do, yeah.
I knew that. I knew the decision
Okay.
in my mind had to be done because, as I said earlier, a guy lives for lighting up his woman, and all I can be responsible for is my behaviour. Hey, and if I'm being an idiot, somebody hold up a mirror. I'm happy to look. What I can't be responsible for is somebody else's insecurities. And if somebody's ex was unfaithful, or if somebody's parents cheated on each other, and you're carrying stuff like that into the relationship, and I'm not making this about my ex, she was an amazing woman, but I'm just saying for purposes of example, you can't be responsible for somebody else's deal. You can only be, as I said, you can only be the candle yourself, walking through the room, and if by your radiance and strength and power and focus on your life radiates and lights other candles to walk their path, that's fine.
Yes.
But you can't be responsible for lighting somebody else's candle. It's just certainly not in a relationship. So at that level. So for me, I had to make a very agonizing decision. Do I go and tell my mum in a time where she doesn't need bad news that I'm going to fall out, or do I just let maybe the next 3-4 weeks, which is our last 3-4 weeks, go, and then but I can't be out of integrity. I can't be inauthentic. So I had to go and tell her. It was one of the hardest decisions. And I turned around to my mum and I says, "Hey mum, I'm splitting up with my ex." And she looks me in the eye. She said, "I knew she wasn't the one." Mothers always know. But it was that level of courage to be my truth. But what I found after that is I wouldn't even invite, and it was a very tough decision, and right or wrong, I'm not asking for judgment here at all, it was my decision. I refused to allow my ex to come to my mum's funeral, to fly back from Dubai to England to the funeral. And that was a hard decision. I mean, I still care about my ex, obviously. It wasn't me being mean, it was me understanding at a deeper level that if she was to be in proximity at that point, at a time in my life where I felt the most loss, I would reconnect in a heartbeat for the wrong reasons. And that was something I as hard as it was to be on my own through the funeral and everything else and almost distraught, I had to be strong and true to my integrity to not allow that to happen, because I knew it would be for the wrong reasons.
Beautiful.
And a while later I'm still single because I wanted to get comfortable with the identity of being alone and close that gap before I allow somebody into my life that I can then contribute to from all of me, not from an agenda of I need something from you that's missing. I think the mind will always justify and always create opportunities for justification and possibility. And I think the danger comes from when you start being too addicted to one of those possibilities.
Yes, okay.
If at the end of my life, I've gone for the rest of my life, another 70, 80 years, without being in a relationship, then I'll look back and say, as long as I was true to my values and I served and I was able to contribute, then that clearly was my life's purpose. But I'm not going to be wedded to that to the point where I'm not open to meeting somebody tomorrow.
Of course
who I fall in love with.
No, sure.
So yeah,
you're not closing it. I'm not suggesting you close any doors.
And just likely, unfortunately, and again, I don't know how much you want to stay on the topic of relationships, but most people don't understand where the entire concept of marriage comes from. Most people just were born into it.
Please share that with us, because I think this could be important.
Feel free to do your research, but marriage is an institution as a concept we grow up with. We're told that's what happens. You date around, you meet somebody, you get married, you spend the rest of your life with them, and unfortunately, if you look around in society today, there is very, very few references for it working successfully, whereby I could use a definition that 10, 15, 20 years later, people are more happy or as happily married than when they walk down the aisle.
Right.
Most people aren't necessarily that happy walking down the aisle. That's a whole different conversation.
Yeah.
But I would say it's probably 1 in 50 to 1 in 100 marriages you can point to in modern day. We're not going back sort of early, because everyone can point to parents that came under the surrender to the social stigma that, look, we can't get divorced, so we may as well get on. Right, today it's a very different game. If you don't make me happy, life's too short, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
Right? And a lot of marriages, again, are put on the wrong foundations to begin with, so therefore you have very little chance for understanding or embracing what unconditional love is. Most people don't know, have no clue what unconditional love is. The fact that I have your best interests at heart, and I will love and support you irrespective of whether it fits my pictures or whether it's reciprocated. And I can get into more definitions, but as an easy initial sort of grasp of unconditional love, you'll get fairly close to it by understanding that for me to have unconditional love for you, it's that I will support, love, and care about you over and above any need for reciprocation, any need for validation, or any care whether it violates my values.
Whatever I do, I mean, however I behave,
It's
I mean,
unconditional.
absolutely, just to make that clear. Yeah.
You slap me around the face and walk off, that's your behaviour, not who you are.
Beautiful, yeah.
Right? That's,
but that's a huge difference, and maybe that's where, in relationships, in marriages, people miss that distinction. Between the behaviour and the person.
A lot of the time, because again, we're still covering up our own, dealing with our own insecurities.
Yeah.
Or our own addiction to certainty, or need for love, or approval, or significance, or whatever it is. But if you take 1 in 50 or 1 in 100 marriages, I mean, you can, and these are the best of the relationships that we've had. The one we choose to spend our life with. That's like taking a revolver, with 50 chambers, putting 49 bullets in it, and spinning the thing, and taking a shot. I mean, it's that level of Russian roulette. And in all fairness, I wouldn't cross the road with those odds, and neither would you. Let alone get married. So we need to understand a lot of the principles behind successful marriage, or where marriage comes from to start with. And unfortunately, marriage itself was not created, the concept of marriage was not created to have any level of connection with unconditional love. It was created based upon a need for economic stability 2,500 years ago in the Greek city-states. And it was when at that time a lot of the sailors were coming in from foreign ports and starting to take Greek women, and therefore the local population was being somewhat diluted, if I may use that phrase.
Right.
And the Greeks came up with this whole concept of being able to be with one partner for life, enshrouded in a level of contractual obligation that therefore would protect these cities or the states from being infiltrated, diluted, losing their sovereignty, whatever you want to call it, or economic level of integrity. And that's where marriage came from. Of course, a little while later it was then taken on, hijacked, whatever phrase you want to call it, by the church as a way to be able to control the institution of bringing people together. And it was just then adopted unquestionably in modern day throughout history by a a public that had no awareness of where it originally came from. You go back 3,000 years to the Egyptians, and you would have a level of unconditional love where if one person was honouring their truth and moving forward, somebody else's truth was on the same path, and they got together and they had children. And at one point their path was different. The partner would honour that. And let's say they went with another partner. The other partner would honour the fact they had children. It was all happy together. Because it was a level of honouring your truth. And I know you're going to be a different person 5 years from now, and I'm going to be different. So while we can validate ourselves together in this moment in time, why should I then impose your unhappiness by contracting you to me 5, 10, 20 years down the line, when you may be a very different person into where on a very different journey as to where I am? Which again, you then have the contrast of, well, what about women specifically who need some sort of level of security around a relationship and a provider to that, because their initial role genetically was to basically nurture and look after the children, while ours was to go out and fight saber-toothed tigers, or provide food for the family. And that's why we're expendable going out to get eaten, but women need to be protected because they're the survival of the species. But if you then look at, again, go back to the Egyptian model, there was a level of honouring, a level of acceptance. The person would come into a woman's life who had children, take them up as his own, plus they would have the previous parent, and there was no judging, there was no jealousy, there was an honouring of, if that is your truth, I honour your truth. There's a very raised level of consciousness, and I think the Egyptians had a lot to teach us in that level, as we still look back at their civilization in awe and wonder at some of the advances they had in civilization that were 2,000 years later we were way behind in the Middle and Dark Ages. But anyway, I'm sort of getting off track a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to continue this, and sadly we are running a little short of time. But let me ask you this, and I think you've touched upon it slightly. What is your vision for the future of humanity in the big picture sense?
It's a powerful question, and I want to come back a little step from that and say that ultimately I don't know. I think there's many different ways.
What if you knew? What would you see as your vision? Sorry to interrupt.
Well, there's many different paths
I don't want to
that
let
we
you
could
duck
take.
the question.
And I won't. That we're at a tipping point right now.
Right.
In many different respects. We're at a tipping point in terms of the civilization that we've manufactured ourselves into globally is 1,000% unsustainable. We have an unsustainable population drawing on an unsustainable resource base with an unsustainable methodology of how we interact with our environment. It's something has to give, and I don't think many people are ready for what that is. It can either go one of several ways. It can either be a sort of cataclysmic level of Hollywood style falling down of civilization, or it can be an evolving level of consciousness that allows us to breed. It could be a mixture of both. It could be something else. I have no idea. All I know, Glenn, is that my role is to walk my truth, be the best me that I can be, shine my candle brightly across any dark room that I walk into, be inspired by other candles that I can hopefully take something from and learn from. And that is the only thing I can do. And if part of my journey on my truth is guided to being able to be a beacon for humanity that can help them evolve at that level, then I'm blessed to have served a little part in a cog to do so.
Yeah.
If it means that my role here is to help a little child on a street that can become something that he wasn't, I'm blessed for that. I don't know. I don't have any delusions of grandeur about what my role is. If I was to check in with my energy, I get a sense that I'm here to help be an example for people in times where they are threatened with a lack of certainty. Because, I mean, we're the first generation in human history that has ever had food certainty. My parents had rations in the war. And we can walk down a street today into a building that we didn't build called a supermarket, walk up and down aisles looking at foods that have been grown by people we've never met, in countries we've never been to, transported on ships we didn't know how to steer, that we can sample for an hour's wages. I mean, never in a time in human history have we had such a level of experience. And the flip side to that, yeah, it's massive upside. You know, we can treat most diseases these days. We understand access to instant knowledge and have a instantaneous level of communication. But the flip side to that is that it has conditioned a lot of people that have grown up in that sort of insular level of certainty to not understand or be able to deal with or cope with the fact that ultimately there is no certainty. Mm-hmm. And if oil hits $250 a barrel next week, you'll see a massive change in civilization. If there's a tsunami, or if there's an endemic, or if there's any of these different things that threaten somebody's level of security, whereby most kids today get upset if their iPad runs out of battery, or McDonald's runs out of barbecue sauce, or if there's a traffic jam and they miss EastEnders. I mean, it is, you chunk back and it's almost like, well, hang on a minute, but what's real? It's not real. Real is if, you peel back the layers of society and understand that, food doesn't come from a supermarket like most school kids think. It comes from a level of agri-farming that is unsustainable and actually not very, nice if you understood it. We are eating stuff that is driven through commercial drivers. That we are, living in a time in history that has massive upside, but is on a crash collision course energetically to change dramatically in our lifetime, and we have no way of being able to stop that. We can only lead by example and be the change we want to be.
Well, I'm glad you said that, Peter, because that was actually my last question. In sharing your passion, as you know, one of the things I normally ask people at the end is whether they have a message for people listening, something that's going to make a huge difference in their life. I mean, I think pretty much everything you've said is going to be really valuable to people listening and watching this. So I'm going to ask you a different question. Be the change that you want to be, right? What change does Peter Sage have in his heart that he would like to share with us now?
It's interesting you asked the question now. It's my 40th birthday next week, and based on your recommendation, I'm actually going to the Himalayas. Would you believe?
Fantastic.
I'm spending 7 days out just contemplating, reflecting. I think any birthday with a zero is a great time for being able to contemplate. And that's overdue. And it's not a question I think I can answer with total integrity here and now, which is why I'm taking a week out to basically tune in. But what I will say is that the answers need to come from a place of truth, not a place of insecurity, not a place of hidden agenda, not a place of
iPads on oil companies.
Yeah, but what's true for you, and an appreciation the fact that what's true for you is almost certainly not going to be true for somebody else. And if you can have tolerance and understanding around that, and not need to beat yourself up or change your direction so that it aligns with somebody just so you feel validation and therefore less insecurity around being true to yourself, and take a stand for what you believe in, not by imposing it on others. We have no right to do that. We're guests on this planet, and we have no right to judge somebody else. Understand, if you were them with their beliefs, their history, their story, you do the same thing. Once you come from that, it doesn't mean you agree with it, it just means you don't judge it. But once you understand that, you can get busy about living your life on your terms. And if you can put a smile on somebody else's face for the better as a result of living your life, then really that's what it's about.
Peter, thank you very much. I hope we've put a smile on some of your faces listening and watching this. Enormous, Peter. Can't thank you enough. It's been an absolute pleasure and a privilege. I'm almost lost for words. What can I say? I mean, this has been a very moving time for me. We've gone almost 2 hours, which is way over my normal thing on sharing your passion. But when you have someone like Peter Sage along, someone with such wisdom, such passion, such presence, such, as I said, words fail me, then I hope you'll agree with me that it's worth going not just one but several extra miles to hear what he has to say. Peter, thank you very much. Glenn, I really appreciate it.
You're an inspiration to me and always have been, Glenn. Thank you.
Thank you too.
And I love the work you're doing to be able to help share with people, and you're on a mission of truth as well, my friend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed for watching and listening to us today. And please join me next time for another Sharing Your Passion. Thanks again, Peter.